And welcome back to LOOPcast. We are live. We have an excellent show prepared for you today. Welcome to everyone live in the chat and those listening afterwards. Today, we are going to be hitting the shutdown drama in the Senate that has ramped up big time overnight. Trump Tower takeover protest and who's really behind it. We get into St. Patrick's Day fun. We got some Irishmen on the podcast today, Irish ladies, some lasses,
sure do.
You may say. And then JD Vance getting exposed for loud socks. That'll be a fun discussion at the end. But I will say we are missing Josh, but we have replaced him with another Hillsdale graduate.
Yes, Hillsdale.
Tyler O'Neill, senior editor at the Daily Signal. Thank you so much for filling in today. It's going to be good.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So O'Neill, O' Irish, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Well, and I don't know how much you obviously don't experience this, but I get a lot of no Irish need apply. The modern version, which I always say the internet is racist because how many of the forms do I have to fill out that it's like error, apostrophe. Oh no, it's the end of the world. And
I never thought of that.
But thank you for sharing your struggle with us. That must be really hard to go through. Yeah.
It's so painful, man.
We hear you. We acknowledge you.
We hear you. We see you. But speaking of painful, and we'll get right into it here, the big question in everyone's minds, are we going to see the government shut down here? Now, it seemed like it was going to head towards shutdown. And then I start seeing reports, and this is where it all ramps up. We have behind closed door meeting, Senator Gillibrand is screaming so loud we can all hear it through thick wood doors. It's from Aisha Hasni, a reporter outside a closed door meeting. And then we get from a CNN reporter that AOC is emerging as a potential to primary Chuck Schumer.
Oh my gosh.
This is not.
Yes.
This doesn't scream.
Yeah, go for it, girl.
This doesn't scream unity, resistance to me. And I think there's good reason behind it. And I'm ready to get into it with you all today. So what's really going on here? And for a little context, the government is actually funded until tomorrow, March 14th, thanks to a temporary bill from December.
Oh, okay, got it.
Oh.
Today. It's tonight. Yeah, it's funded through tonight.
Like midnight tonight. So
yeah. Midnight tonight. If Congress does not act by midnight, we're staring at a shutdown. So the CR, continuing resolution, has passed the House. It is now on to the Senate. And so the House stayed pretty firm. All the Democrats voted against this, but it really didn't matter. There was enough Republicans to push it through. We're now at the point in the Senate where there's a potential for resistance in terms of cloture. So what was projected by Chuck Schumer, here's his message to the party, to the Senate, what he was going to do as of 2 days ago.
Government should be a bipartisan effort, but Republicans chose a partisan path, drafting their continuing resolution without any input from congressional Democrats. Because of that, Republicans do not have the votes in the Senate to invoke cloture on the House CR. Our caucus is unified on a clean April 11th CR that will keep the government open and give Congress time to negotiate bipartisan legislation that can pass. We should.
All right, peace through strength, Chuck Schumer. We are unified. Sounds great.
Well,
that's Wednesday.
Let's flash forward to last night from Chuck Schumer's Twitter account. A shutdown would give Donald Trump the keys to the city, state, and country. Musk has said he wants a shutdown, and reporting has shown he's already making plans to use the shutdown to expedite his destruction of key government programs and services. Change tune. We're not going to shut down the government. This didn't thrill members of the party, and Democrats are really in a hard spot here, right? It's either we shut down the government by not passing this CR, which if you look up any national polling on this, very unpopular. Unpopular specifically with the average American. According to a YouGov poll, we're looking at 60 to 70% favoring compromise over a stalemate. Many see it as childish and immature. But if you look at the extreme elements of the party, specifically the younger elements of the party, they want to burn it to the ground. They want to shut it down. They want to choose this fight as their opportunity to show, hey, we're the resistance. We're not going to go along here. Even if this upsets maybe average Americans, it doesn't matter. This is our time to pick a big fight. The only person actually publicly against this from the beginning was John Fetterman, which credit to John Fetterman breaking all the time. I think he kind of sees the tea leaves. And now Chuck Schumer is like, he's probably right. This is an unwinnable fight for us. So Tyler, as our guest, I'm gonna kick it to you here. Do you see this getting resolved? Do you think the government is going to shut down?
I think the Senate is going to pass it. I think Gillibrand screaming at the top of her lungs suggests to me that she is one of the 8 Democrats who has been targeted to take the fall for this, and she is not happy about it. But I think she is ultimately going to fall in line. The problem is the Democrats will get blamed for this shutdown if it actually happens. And, I think it's a lose-lose for them because on the one hand, you have Schumer making the point, and I think he is largely correct here that President Trump would have a little bit more wiggle room during a shutdown than he already has now to make decisions.
Yeah.
That said, I mean, it's also Trump does not want a shutdown. And this is what we've seen. Like, if Trump wanted a shutdown, he could veto whatever funding bill came out of the House and Senate. He's not going to. He wants to fund the government because he knows that passing a reconciliation bill is the real path forward to lasting change. And he doesn't want to get stymied by a government shutdown battle. He wants to move on. And I think even Democrats are better suited to just accept this and move on. I heard some Democrat messaging, and I really, this was interesting. They said, we're already in a partial government shutdown because Trump and the Doge effort have been going from agency to agency to agency, cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, freezing some of the funds that are going out. And I don't think that's true that this is a partial government shutdown. I think it's a partial government revitalization. But that said, I thought that messaging was interesting because that was coming from a House Democrat who's willing to risk a shutdown. But this is not a popular stance.
Any thoughts, Erica?
Yeah, I mean, kudos to John Fetterman. Ironic that the guy who had a stroke and could barely function during his campaign seems to be the voice of reason on the Democratic Party on this. I was just like, this is crazy. I was hard on him, but I think he's a dangerous player because he has been more reasonable throughout. I mean, Chuck Schumer getting primaried, it's kind of a laughable. He's so safe in his seat. As long as he wants to run, he's going to be there. Although if I was 74 years old and owned 4 homes, I would just retire and enjoy them. But he's a little addicted to power. Just the language, the switch on the language to we are unified, we have this, the Democrats are going to be the resistance, and then to see it just collapse over that 24-hour period the last day or so, it was they're scrambling. They don't have a unified leader in the party following the fall of Harris, and with Trump just coming in with so much rapidity of change and doing exactly what he said he was going to do in so many instances. So it's interesting to see them scramble. And it's interesting whenever something burns down to see who survives and rises through the ashes. I know we were considering having a spot on who are the potential leaders of the Democrats going into 2028 today. And then Tom and I realized that legitimate evil is just boring. And so Democrats, these guys are boring. But also we're going to have to be talking about them a lot starting 2026. So let's not get ahead of ourselves.
I mean, I think the Gavin Newsom podcast has been basically appointment television. I can't get enough of it. Him with Steve Bannon was really unbelievable.
Don't get into it.
Eric, I think you're underwater again. I don't know what happened.
Got it.
All good. So, but yeah, because I was trying to think also. So basically, what Chuck Schumer is saying now is I'm going to be voting for cloture. Cloture basically being you have to reach 60 votes in the Senate to get past a filibuster. And I mean, 2 thoughts. One, it's sad I don't get to hear my favorite Democrat read Green Eggs and Ham or something ridiculous to just continue to pass the time for the inevitable, right? And I will say that it has been impressive to me. Credit to John Thune, credit to Mike Johnson, but outside of a few examples, Thomas Massie being one of them, the party's really been unified around getting this passed. I think smartly so. If you shut down the government, which Tyler, you said you could, you lose all your ability to get things done. If anything, the Trump administration has been, this time around, the most productive, the fastest acting I've ever seen an administration be. I was even trying to think back to context when it comes to government shutdowns. The last one, historically the longest, 35 days, was 2018 to 2019, and it was centered around the border wall. talk about just it almost feels like a different era of politics when the biggest fight was whether or not we can actually defend our southern border through a wall. And during this shutdown, actually 51% blamed Trump. So I think smartly, it seems kind of the era of Trump politics is let's create basically a no-win situation for Democrats here. Either you look crazy, you shut down the government, and you slow everything down. As I even asked Tinfoil Tom on this, shout out Tinfoil Tom, like what's going on behind closed doors here, right? You're on the Hill. He's our lobbyist. It's straight from Tinfoil Tom. So this is for the people. I cannot imagine 7 or 8 Democrats not voting for it. I think they imagine they won't be blamed for a shutdown, but are quickly learning they will be very wrong. If the Democrats vote for the bill to avoid a shutdown, the fringe grassroots get upset and eventually they move on after Donald Trump, quote, does something else. If Democrats don't vote for the bill and the government shuts down, Russ Vo, director of OMB, guarantees that essential services, Social Security checks, Medicaid reimbursements, et cetera, get out the door and that public services, parks, hotlines, et cetera, continue. This way, the public barely even notices a shutdown and no one really cares. And Russ Vo has an easier time finding non-essential personnel to fire.
Ooh,
I mean, talk about no-win situation here. So let's get you on record, Tyler. So you're going to say no, the government is not going to shut down. Erica, you're going to say no, the government is not going to shut down.
They're not going to do it. They were playing chicken. Am I back up? Am I over water?
You're back
now?
up.
All right,
Yeah.
sweet. So yeah, I think they were playing chicken. They were going straight at each other, and the Democrats blinked first, and they're not going to shut it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I agree. I think it's when Schumer comes out and works hard to justify it the day before. I mean, we're at the Daily Signal, we were on the edge of our seats being like, all right, is this going to happen? Are we going to need to work all weekend, covering this shutdown? And then Schumer made that statement. Now we're not entirely out of the woods. It's always possible. Many of these votes, you think it's going to happen one way and then it could go another way. People change their minds all the time. But as of right now, my prediction is the government is open tomorrow.
And you get to enjoy St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, you can enjoy your weekend.
Here. Yeah,
Sweet.
Pi Day, then St. Patrick's Day.
Oh my
And,
God.
I know, it's Pi Day. Happy Pi Day, guys.
Math nerds were up. It's a big day for the math nerds. My dad was a math teacher for 30 years and we celebrated this religiously.
Well, and tomorrow is a big day for the Shakespeare nerds, lovers of the Bard, because it is the Ides of March. So you can all dress in togas and enjoy a little Julius Caesar, little Mark Antony funeral oration.
Or you can celebrate the time when George Washington was almost made king by his own soldiers and then decided no, which is the better Ides of March moment in my mind. I mean,
he chose the better path.
Yes.
Yes, Washington over Caesar, definitely.
He grabbed his glasses and he put them on and said, I have not only grown gray, but I've also grown blind in your service. And
sorry, have you been doing Josh research? He's used that exact quote on the podcast.
That's awesome.
You've been doing Josh research.
I mean, actually, I got that just from Hillsdale and studying these things independently. So, I mean, I wish, but no, it's independent in this case, but I'm
awesome.
Very glad, right thinking minds.
Yeah. We made a great choice having you on to replace. I mean, it's just like having Irish Josh on here. He's a Viking, so he doesn't get all the Irish stuff, but, all right, on to the next one. I'm actually, Tyler, I'm really excited to have you on because I know that you testified in a subcommittee hearing on Doge, kind of specifically about this, but footage coming out of New York, pretty shocking. We'll just start with the clip and then we can get into a little bit of the context. So we can hear the chants here. All right, so for our audio listeners, this is a occupation of the first floor of Trump Tower in New York City. Now, quick research on who's behind this. This is a protesters specifically organized by this group, Jewish Voice for Peace. And I'll get into a little bit of details on that in a second, but basically the people taking over the tower were demanding the release of Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia University graduate student and pro-Palestine activist who was arrested by ICE on March 8th, 2025. Khalil, a legal permanent U.S. resident married to an American citizen, was detained over his role in campus protests against Israel's actions in Gaza. Now, quick search on Jewish Voice for Peace. It really didn't take long, but one of the biggest names tied to this organization was George Soros through his Open Society Foundations. As of 2016, $650,000 to Jewish Voice for Peace.
Yep.
Paid described for things such as human rights work, quote. So, Tyler, so glad to have you here. Who's really behind this protest, right? Like, this can't just be people hanging out in New York City being, let's go take over the Trump Tower, right? Like, what's really going on here?
Well, so George Soros is one of the main figures in what I call the left's dark money network. And this is a superstructure of big donors that are funneling cash to the NGOs, the woke NGOs that staffed and advised the Biden administration, using the administrative state to force woke ideology on the American people. And when I say woke ideology, I mean critical race theory, gender ideology, climate alarmism, and a preference for technocratic government. And so this ideology is what George Soros champions and pushes, not just here in the US, but also abroad. But it's also interesting that you bring up Jewish Voice for Peace, because I covered them with a few other interesting connections. They actually have this. This is so weird. These left-wing nonprofits are unionizing. So, like, the idea of a nonprofit, you know, you're meant to educate the public, you're meant to serve the public, but of course, the funny thing is, these left-wing groups, they believe in unions so much that they want to create an adversarial relationship between management and labor inside these organizations, where theoretically the people work there because they believe in the mission. They believe in the people. So it's so insane that you would have a nonprofit unionize, but that's where we are. So there's a union at Jewish Voice for Peace, and this union is part of a superstructure of unions that also represents the Washington Post, Politico, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and many other people. These connections are all over the place. And of course, for those, I think Catholic Vote listeners are very well aware of the Southern Poverty Law Center. We
made it.
Yeah.
I think we were on a hate map.
We were on a hate map for a while.
Are you there yet? Yeah.
Oh yeah, Catholic goes there. For sure.
Make sure. But they demonize mainstream conservative and Christian groups. And this was my first book, Making Hate Pay: The Corruption of the Southern Poverty Law Center, putting them on this hate map with chapters of the Ku Klux Klan, a hate map that inspired a domestic terrorist attack in DC in 2012. But they have the Ruth Institute on the hate map. And when they put the Ruth Institute on there, which those of you who know, I mean, Jennifer Roback Morse is the salt of the earth lady. And the big complaint the SPLC had against her was that she cited directly from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It stands on
like Mein Kampf, man.
Oh yeah. So like this is the thing. And this organization, the Southern Poverty Law Center, if it were to be ideologically consistent, they would have to put the entire Catholic Church on the hate map with chapters of the Klan. But of course they don't do that. But the interesting thing is the FBI cited them on radical traditional Catholic hate groups.
The Richmond Memo.
I remember that.
Yes.
The Richmond Memo.
So all of this, and they were able to influence the Biden administration. They're part of what I describe as the Woktopus, this network of left-wing groups that staffed and advised the Biden administration and pushed it. And so I testified before Congress because I found a lot of connections between George Soros, Open Society Foundations, a group called the Tides Center and the Tides Foundation, and USAID, which sent the Tides Center $20 million. Of course, USAID has been funding the same projects across the world that Open Society has been funding. And Open Society was very clear. They came out with a statement saying, oh, all these claims that we get money from USAID are false. And I'm like, yeah, except back in the early 2000s, you were listing USAID as one of your donor partners. And then, oh, wait, well, yes, you don't directly receive money from USAID because you're smarter than that. But you and USAID jointly fund groups like the East-West Management Institute. I mean, I can go on and on and on. I have a big story I'm working on literally today.
Awesome.
his impact in Albania, of all places.
Whoa.
Most Americans aren't familiar with Albania. It's a rather corrupt, unfortunately, former Soviet place
Mhm.
that.
Mother Teresa's from Albania. There we
Oh,
go.
wow,
Yeah.
cool, great tie. I didn't
Fun
even.
fact.
Tyler, can I
Yeah.
just quickly ask you a clarifying question? So,
Yeah, of
getting
course.
back to unions really quick. So, Jewish Voice for Priests unionizing. To me, that suggests that there's so much money there that people would even like, in order to unionize, there would have to be so much money for you to be able to demand more, basically.
Yes, I mean,
And
so
so then let me follow up with this. I'm just curious. So with USAID getting exposed for just shocking amounts of American aid going all over the world, but a lot of it actually ending up domestically. So if you could give me a percentage, like how much of these, when I see a protest like this, right, they take over the Trump Tower, how much of it is organic by percentage? Like if we just got rid of all the funding that goes around everywhere, how much of this would just stop overnight, in your opinion?
oh gosh, I mean, at least 50%, probably
Wow.
higher. The difficulty is, so the people are angry about it, but there are a lot of these professional protesters, and you saw this with the college, the anti-Israel riots on college campuses, where you would have these organizations funded often by George Soros, surprise, surprise, and they would be bringing food to these protesters to keep these camps going. And
Right.
this isn't like normal. This isn't like, Chipotle. This is like Pret a Manger. These are higher staff.
In New York
They
City.
go to Starbucks
Yeah.
and bring coffee for these people. So it's like this is what's going on, and uh, it really raises a lot of questions, like what is George Soros's end goal? And
Yeah.
yeah,
It's interesting because I've been watching the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, right? And Catholic
Yep.
votes very involved there. And everyone's like, oh, this billionaire Elon Musk is putting money into the Wisconsin. These evil billionaires are funding a Supreme Court race. It turns out that the pro-abortion candidate is funded like 60% by George Soros directly. And I think like whenever we hear the woke-topus, which is a great term, whenever you hear the whole woke-topus story, you start to feel like that meme with the guy, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, with
Charlie
like,
Day.
yes, oh, here's this book. Okay, buy The Woke-topus by Tyler O'Neill. There's your ad for
not
the day.
working very well.
Yeah, it's that weird camera. But you start to feel like, okay, am I crazy? All these red lines, like how can this possibly be real? Or I was looking at your graphic, Tyler, where you have like all of the action items in the center, and then the government agencies connected with the supposedly private NGOs and 501c3s on the top. And you start to, when you follow the money, the tentacles are so embedded. You start to feel like it. Can we turn this back at this point? Is it possible to untangle? And I know that that's sort of like the Doge Elon Musk mission right now. But if I was to ask you to predict, 3 years from now, will there be a mortal blow to the George Soros effort to remake America? What can we do at this point?
No. I mean, part of the point of the book, and I mean, I say this throughout because I wrote it before the 2024 election, before I knew that Trump was going to win. And I say over and over again, like, even if a conservative president takes over, this influence campaign is going to continue. These people believe what they believe. And I think this is one of the great, this is the albatross hanging around the neck of the Democratic Party, because they realize, and I mean, this is no secret, that many of them realize they have to tack to the center. They have to become a little bit more moderate. You had that meeting, and they chose Loudoun County to go meet and strategize about this. But they ultimately, like the DNC, tried to distance itself from that meeting.
Right.
And the reason is because this woke influence campaign, the superstructure, is there to stay. And also, like, this is one of the things I had to defend the First Amendment from Bill O'Reilly, because I went on O'Reilly's show and he was like, well, Tyler, this dark money, shouldn't we get rid of this dark money? And I'm like, well, no, actually, dark money just refers to your right as an American to give money to a cause that you believe in and not have your identity revealed. This is a very important right. Like the NAACP and Americans for Prosperity have fought for this right, and it is rightly theirs.
Mhm.
But what you don't have a right to is the people's money. So one of the things, we're thankfully Elon Musk, President Trump are going through all these federal grants and trying to get rid of the woke money that goes to them. The problem is, George Soros and his network and these people like Pierre Omidyar, they have a lot of independent money and they're bankrolling it themselves. So the woke-topus is going to continue. What I think we can prevent, like what I think we can do, is cut off the tentacles from re-entering the administrative state. But this is a long-term process, and this is not something that, Trump has been super muscular. He's exceeded my expectations in the beginning of this administration, but this is not something you solve in 4 years. And this is a long-term fight. So yeah,
Buckle up.
there's going to be I think this is a long-term, anyway.
Yeah. Well, on that point too, someone was saying this first term feels very chaotic, and it does in a way. And the way that I've started to think about it is Trump has so many band-aids to rip off at this point. He has to accomplish a lot of different things at the same time. So it's like, this might be smart, but you're seeing 4 different things happening in conjunction that just overwhelm you. So I think just specifically zeroing in on this policy, one, going and punching USAID in the mouth, I think was a great message to send, right? Like,
Yes.
Billionaires, guess what? You don't have easy access to taxpayer money to go do whatever you want. That's ridiculous. We're stopping that. On the other hand, like I just go and see news yesterday, speaking of Colombia, we basically saw these campuses just turn into riots overnight and nothing really being done from the top level. And so quickly we see Trump pulling $400 million of federal funding from Columbia University, saying it failed to protect these Jewish students. And then surprise, surprise, Columbia University says it expelled some students who seized the building last year.
See how easy that was? Come on, guys. What could we do with 800 million? Let's just slash it. See what they do. I mean,
you said muscular, and I think that's actually a really good word. This is muscular, right? And going after Mahmoud as well, muscular, right? This is a big swing that's igniting big questions as to what should we accept on our college campuses, especially from people who enjoy the privileges of coming here to study, who are not American citizens. To me, not as much of a First Amendment issue as it is our immigration policy issue, like what we're going to allow happen for people that come to the country and then protest and organize on behalf of other foreign countries, which is insane. I took a look too into what exactly the government is demanding from Columbia to get this funding back, and I also thought that was interesting. So one, we have a mask ban, which I was like,
nice.
Crazy, you can do this. Adopting the IHRA or similar, placing the Middle East, South Asian, and African Studies departments under academic reviewership and admissions reform, specifically on the DEI front. Right. Now, on the mask ban, that was funny because people freaked out about that. They're like, you're punishing COVID people, blah, 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 blah. Actually, New York had a mask ban prior to COVID. You could not wear a mask in public spaces to cover your identity, specifically for robbery. Right. Like, what do you do when you go and rob a bank? You throw a mask on. Like, that's a huge problem. Right. And so now it's like, okay, we're just returning to a place where, yeah, maybe you shouldn't be able to cover your face and then go commit crimes, intimidate people, etc. All seemingly pretty common sense. Yeah. Novel.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, and this is, shout out to my school, my alma mater, Hillsdale College, because Hillsdale proudly does not accept federal funding specifically for this reason. And we are very happy that President Trump is being muscular in his demands here. He has every right to be, because the administration determines how this money is spent. But, I think it's better, and it would be better for Columbia. It would be better for Hillsdale. It is better for places that don't receive federal funds to be able to make their own decisions. And surprise, surprise, Columbia could make its own decisions on these things and be as woke as it wanted to be if it didn't accept federal funding for these things. And so, of course, because it accepts federal funding, now President Trump can say, oh, well, the conditions on your federal funding have changed. And, I think these are good conditions. I want to see Columbia adopt these policies. But it's interesting just how revealing it is that, you can have an administration make these demands. Hillsdale has done the right thing in insulating itself from the changes of administration by not accepting federal funding. I wish, I think universities are a net positive for society. I think, I know this might be tinfoil hat, but I think that if a university provides good enough education for its people, then those who actually went to the university or who support the university could fund the university themselves through their own money. And we wouldn't have to have the federal government putting a gun to our heads saying, give me your tax dollars, and then taking those tax dollars and giving them to the universities.
100%. Yeah. And I want to hop in there because we talk a lot about the Newman Guide schools, which is our solid Catholic schools that are really trying to bring back a classical understanding, trying to do the Hillsdale thing. Guys, it is time to divest of federal funding. We have a good 4-year ramp at least now, hopefully a 12-year ramp if we can hold it together, but I'm not gonna count on that. So yeah, like you said, Tyler, I'm a huge fan of getting these schools that really have a unique mission, offer a unique set of skills and experiences to students to get out of the federal funding business. The other thing that absolutely boggles my mind here, and it tells you a lot about the priorities of our Ivy League institutions, is that a school like Columbia, they have a $14.8 billion endowment. The interest on that endowment is over $1.7 billion a year. Harvard, $53 billion endowment. I mean, it's like the 6th largest economy in the world or something crazy like that. And they still will kowtow to $400 million cut in funding and be like, oh my gosh, we lost $400 million. You're like, guys, you are in a position you could, if you really believed in this woke ideology, if you really believed in masks on your protesters, you have the freedom today to be free of federal funding, but they won't do it because what they really worship is that endowment, which is untouchable. Heaven forbid we tap into that thing. It is meant to sit there. They are
a hedge fund.
They are slaves of their hedge fund. And no, just as well, I don't want them to be terribly successful at this point, but it's ironic to me that they would be like, oh my goodness, our principles are being attacked. You have one principle. It is your endowment. And it drives me nuts.
Show me the money, I think is the term.
Show me the money.
Erica, next section here, I got you on it. So bizarre and weird, I think, was the start to the section.
Well, bizarre and weird. Yeah, free speech versus forced speech. Guys, things got hot in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, this week. And it was not about Ukraine. No, it was not about Taiwan and China. This was Representative Keith Self, our friend in Texas, referring to Representative Timothy Sarah McBride, the Democrat from Delaware, a man who dresses as a woman, as Mr. McBride. In response, Mr. McBride shoots back by calling Self Madam Chair. Haha, LOL. In steps Representative Bill Keating of Taxachusetts, to defend the honor of the weaker male and demand Self comply with McBride's preferences. Roll the tape.
Recognize the representative from Delaware, Mr. McBride.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ranking Member Keating, also wonderful.
Mr. Chairman, could you repeat your introduction again, please?
Yes, we have set the standard on the floor of the House, and I'm simply...
What is that standard, Mr. Chairman?
There are two sexes.
Would you repeat what you just said when you introduced a duly elected representative from the United States of America, please?
I will. The representative from Delaware, Mr. McBride.
Mr. Chairman, you are out of order. Mr. Chairman, have you no decency? I've come to know you a little bit, but this is not decent.
We will continue this.
You will not continue it with me unless you introduce a duly elected representative the right way.
A little context for the audio listeners. We're talking about Congressman. Again, this is a man, Tim McBride, right? This is a man that was elected. He's transgender, so he presents as a woman, and very obviously a man. Actually, not that long ago was a man, but has presented all kinds of questions and problems, and of course, opportunity to kind of make it a big campaign issue for him.
Yeah. So the moment goes viral. This was like all over, and you can imagine. And I think, like, with good reason, we aren't just pulling this out because it's gone viral, but this is actually an issue that many of us face in our workplaces and in our schools today. Like, are we compelled by, in the words of Representative Keating, decency to refer to a man as a woman because he tells us to refer to a woman as a man because he tells or she tells us to. And so, of course, we had different takes all over. I love, Representative McBride, who, like, this is, I'm being put upon, and like, immediately called oppressor coming out of this meeting and was like, and said, oh, yeah, do you want to just play this? This gets kind of crazy. This is McBride.
We will not take a lecture on decorum from a party that incited an insurrection. I appear to live rent-free in the minds of some of my Republican colleagues.
Is he smiling?
I wish that they would spend even a fraction
Well, he loves this.
of the
It's good
time
attention.
that they spend thinking about me, thinking about how to lower the costs for American families. I wish they would spend a fraction of the time that they spend thinking about me, figuring out how to make government actually work better, rather than making it work worse in order to prove that government can't work. They are obsessed with culture war issues. The Republican Party is obsessed with culture war issues. It is weird and it is bizarre.
Weird and
the
bizarre.
American people deserve serious legislators, serious elected officials.
Weird and bizarre was the money line there.
Weird and bizarre. Not that Representative McBride spends hours of his time reading books to kids in elementary schools about how it's really cool to be trans. Like, that's not weird and bizarre that you have to talk about your sexuality to other people's small children. It's not weird and bizarre that you started wearing dresses and then, like, had all these surgeries. Like, this flipping of the shame and being like, you all are the culture war people, like, when you're the one who's mashing all the norms. This is gaslighting. The whole thing. But anyway, do we want to do Barstool Conservative before we pitch it to Tyler? Because this was one conservative's take on the whole thing.
Yeah, so to round this out before I get Tyler, because Tyler, I saw you tweeted about this.
Yeah.
This moment for me was a good reminder that, the Republican Party right now is kind of this big tent coalition, right? It's kind of the golden age of America, the return of common sense, this and that. And not everyone that is a part of that party is with us on this issue. And so this take, I think
there is a representative who is transgender. Sarah McBride was purposely referred to as Mr., and it's getting a lot of traction. I feel like it's mean-spirited to do it just to be mean. Now, that doesn't mean that I want transgender people in women's sports or women's spaces, because that has an actual physical, tangible impact.
Like, I'm still learning the characters in politics right now. I'm like, oh, it does look like a girl. So, obviously there's been a transition made. It's a lot different than when someone's at a cafe and it's a guy with a beard and a mustache and clearly a man, but then has a skirt on and lipstick, and you're like, want to be called a girl. It's like, that is very difficult to understand. And this is reaching. This is attention. This is reaching. This isn't fair. But I think it's inappropriate. I think, look, this is clearly looks like a woman, and it was done twice.
So Tyler, what say you? Is this a situation where you shouldn't? I don't really know what the argument is because I see them as so connected, but can you make the disconnection? Should you, out of politeness or some other virtue, potentially refer to someone by their preferred pronouns at this point?
You can make the argument, but I think it doesn't hold up. I mean, ultimately, transgender, gender ideology is a worldview. And if you buy the worldview that, someone's internal sense of gender, which is a new Gnostic, this is a neo-Gnosticism. The church rightly rejected Gnosticism as a heresy, almost 2,000 years ago. And yet now we have this new version of Gnosticism where they say, oh, there is a hidden truth that I have discovered about myself, and it is that I am actually the opposite sex. And that's because up in the spiritual realm, which is somehow superior to the physical realm, I am really the opposite sex. Therefore, I have to make my body resemble the opposite sex. there are so many levels of insanity here that you have to buy in order to get to the final conclusion. And I think we have to reject root and branch every part of this ideology. And when you are kowtowing to the gender pronouns or to these things, you are giving away the game. You are saying reality is this Gnostic reality. And I want to feel for, look, if Tim McBride has serious mental health issues that need to be addressed, I'm sensitive to that. I don't want to be mean to him, but he is male, and I guarantee, like, I don't know this for absolute certain, but I'm pretty darn sure he would not be the congressman from Delaware if he hadn't identified as female.
No question.
Right.
Like, if you are a young white male in the Democratic Party today, how do you make yourself palatable to their ideology? There are smart people who want to lead the Democratic Party who are young white males or even young white females. I mean, these days, because of the
because you're cisgender
sexual Olympics,
right.
You're considered an oppressor unless you fit multiple of these identities. The cheap shot, the easy way to get around all that is to say, I'm transgender. And then you get more attention. Now, of course, it's a long-term slog. If you are forcing your body to resemble that of the opposite sex, there are a lot of negative things that come with that. And, if Mr. McBride wakes up one morning and realizes I've been living a lie and detransitions, I'm going to feel very sorry for him that he's going to have to go through the process of detransition. It's painful. It's difficult. But I think, I look at this individual and I say, I can have compassion for you while still saying you are being misled and you are misleading other people and you are pushing an ideology that is dangerous for our society. Those two things can be held side by side.
Mm-hmm. 100%. I think too, the argument from the woman on the podcast there, she's saying, well, if you get to a certain point, like if your makeup gets good enough, then you can tell us how to refer to you. So, right, like Congressman McBride is somehow like he got enough surgery and enough makeup that now but if you're a dude with a beard and like you don't have enough money to have the surgery, then you don't get that. Like that to me is just, it is an incoherent way of approaching speaking about human beings. And at the other point too, Tyler, your whole analysis there of the new Gnosticism and needing to reject this root and branch and speak truthfully. I think as Catholics sometimes and Christians, we often want to be kind and we equate kindness with decorum, these words that are being thrown at Congressman Self there, like, have you no decency and decorum? And we want to have these things, right? We're all from the British Isles. We highly prize being decorous and polite. But that the Christian understanding of kindness is living in the truth. And I know everyone in the chat's been like throwing in there, like, we have to prioritize truth. And that true kindness comes about when we live in the truth ourselves. And like you said, it's not, you can honor other people's human dignity without honoring their insanity.
Yeah, I think a good reminder too, that instead of throwing these people out of the coalition, pushing them back to the other side by just being really angry and rabid, like, no, you can't do that. I just think this is an opportunity for more education, really, of just how do we have a coherent argument? Because even on her own arguments merits, if I were to take it at its face, like Tim McBride, Sarah McBride, whatever you want to call it, does not look like a woman.
Yeah,
looks like a man. Voice is a man, looks like a man. Like to force me to pretend otherwise is pretty crazy. I mean, I know you're talking about the beard or whatever. Like, it's crazy that we all had to sit here and pretend that this person is not a man, obviously a man, right? So you get the executive order from Trump, which I think is important actually to have clarity from the top. There's two sexes, male and female. And it's funny, like, oh, you classic projection, right? Like, you're trying to make this all about pronouns and how you refer to me instead of getting real issues done. When of course you're forcing the issue by making people refer to you as something other than your sex. So like, let's remove the distraction.
You walked into the women's bathroom, man. Like, you're the one who did that.
No, it's like, it's important from a truth perspective, but it's also important from a very practical safety perspective of we cannot allow our society to have people who can just claim by the day who they are, what bathroom they should be entitled to, what sports they should be entitled to play. And it's like, okay, we're almost there because I think we have that. But for me to not address that these two things are related, that you can just say who you are and you actually still need to demand out of kindness or decency, for me to refer to you as something other than what you are is related to the bathroom, the sports problem. And so really just hammering home, yes, these things are related. We cannot give an inch. As you said, root and branch, I think is the proper terminology. And yeah, get back to common sense. The golden age of America, as Trump says.
100%.
So next, let's push St. Patrick's Day because we have a sock conversation to be had at the end of this episode. I will say now, we saw an op-ed, and I'm actually, Tyler, I'm excited because you are not Catholic, you are Anglican, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to put that out for the audience. So we had an op-ed in the New York Times. Opinion: the age of Trump has its prophet, Pope Francis. This is a Catholic podcast. We talk about this often. I'm going to read some excerpts, and then we can discuss afterwards some experts. The yearning for a leader who puts the needs and interests of others, including the least powerful, ahead of his own is felt especially among the many Americans today who desperately seek a light inside the darkness of Donald Trump. Francis has become even more outspoken as those worrisome political trends accelerated, especially with Mr. Trump's electoral victory. Shortly after the onset of his current illness, Francis took direct aim at Mr. Trump's mass deportation policy and demonization of immigrants. What is built on the basis of force, Francis warned in an extraordinary letter to the American bishops, and not on the truth about the equal dignity of every human being, begins badly and will end badly. So the final line here is, but as Democrats flounder for a message to counter Mr. Trump, they could do worse than to listen to a pope who has been preaching one for more than a decade. And so this was actually done by Dave Gibson, director of Fordham's Center on Religion and Culture. So Erica, let's leave it to you first. General thoughts on this essay. Is he the anti-Trump? The antidote?
Yeah, is he the prophet of our time? I read the essay. David Gibson, first off, I mean, he is Catholic, but if you do a quick search of his articles and his Twitter profile, he does live in the world that ended on November 5th last year because Trump was elected and everything is plunged into darkness. I find it disgusting when a man is in the hospital dying, namely Pope Francis, in languishing, for American pundits to come out with articles like this, casting him as somehow the anti-Trump prophet. I think this is along the lines of Thomas Rees last week saying that Trump and J.D. Vance are going to hell because that was our Jesuit who suddenly discovered hell. They're going to hell because of their immigration policies. And then David Gibson coming out here being like, and Pope Francis will lead us out of the darkness. I would like to think, I think the most charitable interpretation of this is that David Gibson is concerned about the shrinkage of the Catholic Church in America, and he sees this as an opportunity for evangelization and drawing people into the warm embrace of Mother Church because they're so disgusted by Donald Trump. And if he can cast our Pope as the prophet of our time, leading us out of populism and nationalism into this globalist unity that he somehow thinks Catholicism is, which it's not, that somehow we will have this wave of converts coming through. So maybe that's what he's trying to do. I actually don't think so. I'd push back. Though. Yeah, I don't think the most charitable interpretation is the right one.
I actually don't think it's that at all. I think that he's nakedly partisanly using Pope Francis to get a dig in at Trump, which I think potentially on his deathbed is disgusting.
It is disgusting.
And I actually don't like when anyone really does that.
Steel manning it. She was just, I don't think
I was trying to steal man.
Yeah. Of course, but I just am so angry. I'm so angry that they constantly do this because it's for anyone that was alive for more than 3 years ago. If you were born more than 3 years ago, everyone sees what is being done, right? Like I did some quick digging, and Tyler, I do want to get your outside perspective on this. So he was a part of a WAPO opinion piece in 2021 titled "Joe Biden and the Struggle for American Catholicism." He was quoted in it. He didn't write it. I won't give him writing credit. So just a sample of this. This was about when Archbishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles, and this might be the reason why he's not currently a cardinal. He said during this, right after Joe Biden had the mass there, after he was inaugurated, quote, "I must point out," Gomez wrote, "that our new president has pledged to pursue certain policies that would advance moral evils and threaten human life and dignity, most seriously in the areas of abortion, contraception, marriage, and gender. Of deep concern is the liberty of the church and the freedom of believers to live according to their consciences. This was directly to Biden, directly after he was inaugurated. Get a quote from David Gibson here. It's really striking that you have the president of the United States, an old-time Catholic from Scranton, more in line with the Pope than the American bishops.
And that's David Gibson.
That's David Gibson. And he wasn't even really the worst comment here. So all the people kind of in the club here, we get the Vatican official calling the statement most unfortunate, and Francis set an upbeat tone. He said that he was praying that Biden would be guided by a concern for building a society marked by authentic justice and freedom, and a particular concern for the poor, the vulnerable, and those who have no voice. It linked Biden and Francis as advocates of, quote, dialogue-seeking Catholicism built on an optimistic evaluation of creation. The conflict was called a, quote, functional schism by Catholic writer Michael Sean Winters. So a markedly different tune when criticism comes for our previous president, Joe Biden, who genuinely was obsessed with cramming as much gender ideology, abortion, and prosecuting Catholics through the justice system as possible, right? I mean, that's like almost obsessively so over his time in the Oval Office. So I just would like to push back immediately. This is pretty naked partisanship, if you ask me. But Tyler, your perspective from the outside, how do you see Pope Francis? How do you see the treatment kind of going on in global politics right now when people use him for these kind of things?
Well, I find it interesting when they want to use Pope Francis, they conveniently forget that he has stood against gender ideology forever. And like he has occasionally these things where he'll invite like drag queens to something, and you can tell that his Jesuit side is showing that he's trying to like, hint at being pro LGBTQ, even though he can't be, because he knows he can't be. Like it's the catechism of the Catholic Church. It goes straight back to scripture. You can't endorse same-sex marriage. You can't endorse abortion. You can't endorse transgenderism. Like all of this stuff is evil. And Pope Francis has condemned it in the past. And of course, it's interesting to me because, as you note, I am an outsider, but I tend to follow things in Catholicism closely because I tend to hold my separated brethren and sisters in high regard. And
thank you.
I can't help but see how the Catholic Church and other churches, like I was baptized Episcopal and now I'm Anglican. And what we're seeing is this ripping apart, this bifurcation. You have the woke and then you have the actual common sense sides continually splitting apart on ideological lines. And, unfortunately, the elites in this country still need to be woken up by Trump's victory in November. Like they seem not to realize that the American people are not in favor of their woke agenda, and they're rising up against this. I think we have to continue to rise up and deliver that message over and over and over again. And unfortunately, it's going to be painful in our denominations, because you're seeing this bifurcation, and it's not just among Protestants and Catholics. I mean, it's among Catholics, it's among Anglicans, it's among Baptists, it's among Jews, it's even among Muslims. Like this basic divide, it reminds me of the divide between pro and anti-slavery sides before the Civil War, and churches split. And I see the Catholics who tend to follow their faith as far closer to me than any Episcopalian who thinks that you don't have to believe that Jesus rose from the dead on the third day in order to be saved. Like there is a wider gap between people who call themselves Christians and those who don't believe the gospel, and those who are in a denomination that is technically separate from me, but actually believe the gospel. At the end of the day, if you believe Jesus rose from the grave on the third day, that is like the most important thing in my mind. Mm-hmm. And I would gladly link arms with everyone who believes that, because also it tends to be the case that if you believe that, if you really believe that Jesus is God and that he is coming to judge the quick and the dead, then you are going to follow certain things. You're going to believe things about the universe and reality that align with common sense and the truth, and that push back against this insanity. So, I find it interesting that, whenever Pope Francis talks about immigration and climate, they love to rush in and say, oh, he is the new Messiah. But as soon as he talks about gender ideology, they're silent. They're like crickets.
Mhm.
And
For sure.
yeah, I think we have to stand for the truth, no matter which denomination you're part of.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting the link that you're making there between what we believe dogmatically, right, in terms of dogma, doctrine, and how we act morally. Because a lot of people, I think the way that non-religious Americans see religious Americans is like, that freedom of religion thing, like you can believe what you want to believe, you can worship how you want to worship in your church buildings and in your homes, and that shouldn't affect how you vote in the public square, how you educate your children as future citizens of the country, because that's just private, right? But I think, where we share the conviction with, as you're saying, this divide that runs down the heart of every church community in America right now, practically, except the Episcopalians. I think they're like all on one side at this point. No, sorry if we have any like Orthodox Episcopalians over there. I salute you. Come on over. The water's warm. But I think that's another that the left and progressives have a really hard time understanding us when we say, but I believe in Jesus Christ, so I cannot call Timothy McBride she, her, and Congresswoman, because this is connected to the fact that Jesus Christ rose again from the dead, or my pride in my country, my love of being an American, my love of my grandmother's Irish heritage and my grandfather's Lithuanian heritage. Like that's part of the beauty of what I believe about how God made the world, and that we're given certain things about who we are. We're given our sex. We're given our heritage and our history to honor and to take care of and to give meaning to through our sanctification. It's so important that we be educating our children to understand that connection and that integrity between who we believe Jesus Christ was, how we live our lives out, and how we act in the public square. Because that is going to give them an integrity of life and a wholeness of being that will give them such a leg up in just functioning in the world. And, we talk about the rise of anxiety and depression, especially among white liberal girls, and the lost generation and all that. Well, those who believe, who understand the gift of our faith as having effect in the world, they're going to have a much happier life, and they're going to change the world. So yeah, we have a long way to go, but I think we have a leg up on George Soros and all those girls protesting at Trump Tower to go full circle. I kind of went off on a limb there. Sorry.
No, it's good. It's almost like our beliefs extend beyond consequentialism, or like the secular humanist idea that like basically whatever the majority thinks is best. If the majority thinks this is good, whoever has the power, like it actually doesn't matter. That argument
blows my mind. I'm like, did you miss 1850s like history where the majority said slaves are 3/5 of a person? I'm happy if there are slaves in other states. Did you miss all of that? And
right. No, I just think, well, okay, I feel like we have tolerance. So it's like, we got to do the Charlie Day meme, right? You got to go into all the connections, but legitimately, whether intentional or unintentional, a dumbing down of the American education system, where you're not going back to foundational primary documents written by the greatest thinkers that essentially constructed what we understand to be Western civilization right now. I guarantee those people did not have the thought that whatever the majority, the mob, thought at the time. Literally, the design of the American system of government, constitutional republic, is to temper the bad desires of the mob, right?
Well,
and like
we're
getting
this weird, the majority
yeah,
to rule. Like this is the balance, and that's what's so brilliant about it, is that it does believe that the people have the ultimate decision. The majority of the people should rule. They should be in the driver's seat. But you have these checks and balances to prevent them from going overboard. And right now we have an administrative state that has gone overboard and doesn't have checks from the people. So it's the worst of both worlds, where you have a minority that thinks they're better than everybody else, and they're ruling over everybody else. And most people aren't aware of it because it's so insidiously created.
Yeah.
Just
It's
a
like
little more
for the
fun.
people that say they're destroying democracy, just swap it out for bureaucracy and it's accurate.
Correct. 100%.
True that.
All right, so we saw Twilight Zone now, Tyler. You know, Twilight Zone is where we get to pick out some fun news stories. This kind of segues in nicely with St. Patrick's Day coming up, weekend celebrations on
right.
Monday. But Erica,
Don't
you
have my
had
beer on me. But
Erica, you had some commentary on socks, I think.
I do. I have a question for you. I'm going to take
Yeah.
advantage of. I know I have guys on my podcast. If I can call you guys, may I? Please.
Yep.
Yes. Pronouns he
Allowed.
him. Okay. So we of course had the Irish Prime Minister and his wife visited the Vice President visited the White House this week. So lots of green was going around, and Trump was talking, tariffs and all this like high-minded stuff and what the United States is doing for Ireland. But then he got a little distracted in the middle of his meeting. Can you roll that tape for me?
Oh yeah.
By the way, I have to speak of inflation. I love these socks. What's with these socks?
It's in honor of the T-shirts.
I'm trying to stay focused, but I'm very impressed with the VP's socks. By the way,
So for the audio
Stop the
listeners,
meeting.
he had to stop the meeting talking about inflation. He's like, I'm impressed with these socks. And he points JD Vance is wearing these big green shamrock socks with his very, sophisticated, tailored, bespoke suit and then the socks. So it was very cute, very like pro-Irish moment. But my question for you, gentlemen, so is it okay for a guy in the Oval Office to be wearing the suit, but then to have the loud statement sock? Like, is this a thing?
yes.
Okay.
100%.
Okay. Tyler's
It's like-
pro sock.
So two things.
Anti.
They're only so like I wear suits to the office every day, partially because I go on TV, I represent the Daily Signal, I got to look good. But I can do two things. I can have something classy on my lapel, and this one is understated, but I'm a map guy. So I like, it's not just the American flag, it's the American flag map, which is great. And then you can have the socks. And the thing about the socks is most of the time, nobody's ever going to see them. And you can make like a tiny statement and you can just have fun with it. So like right now I'm wearing, Christmas themed Baby Yoda socks. Because
You did tell. I was going to say you don't have to tell, but you did.
Yeah. No, I don't mind. I do have my more serious. I have Abraham Lincoln. I have George Washington, of course, socks. But I like to have a small statement, and it has to be understated. It has to be small, and it has to be, limited. But I think there's nothing indecorous about having a little bit of that down where nobody sees it. And if they see it, maybe they'll like it.
Tyler's painted me in a tough
That was a
position
good
because
argument. Give us the other, Tom. Come
all
on.
right, because Tyler's painted me in a tough position because he's more well dressed than me right now. He's in a suit and he used the word indecorous. So he's really coming in hot
Very Hillsdale.
on
Very
the type
Hillsdale.
of
Okay,
very
on
Hillsdale.
brand. Huh?
Listen, I was someone that was gifted loud socks when I was in high school, and I haven't updated said socks. I've slowly updated said socks. I think it's super tacky. I think if you're going to go to the effort of wearing a suit, you might as well complete the look by wearing, especially in the Oval Office. I get it's fun, St. Patrick's Day, whatever.
That's the shoes thing.
No.
And this is where I disagree with some of my colleagues, because I have colleagues and I really like them. Like some of these colleagues who do this, but like
They're all right.
they're wearing a suit, right? And then he'll have sneakers or he'll have like
Hate
shoes.
that. I'm in on that.
Yeah, I'm like, no, look, you wear, and I'm a slip-on guy. I mean, it's kind of silly. I know how to tie my own shoes, but I like slipping them on and off. They're really great, fancy dress slip-on shoes that I have, and I wear those all the time.
Like
And
loafers?
like, yeah. So
Okay.
the
Loafer. Yeah, that's
That
classic.
plays.
but you don't wear running shoes with a suit, but you can wear, and many of the other thing, getting gifted bespoke socks can be a problem because you have to have ones that you actually like and agree with, and like you want to have the subtle message, because and this is where I can totally understand if you didn't like the loud socks that you got, because there are a lot of loud socks And I'm not for loudness's sake. It's
Okay.
got to be something that speaks to you, that's something that's valuable to you. And it usually needs to be at least a little understated. The best
What is
stuff-
Christmas and Baby Yoda saying to you combined?
Yeah. It connects to, so Christmas is my favorite time of year. I mean, unfortunately, Easter is the actual higher holiday because you're celebrating something better. But the Easter hymns, which I love, are not quite as strong as the Christmas hymns.
Oh
And
man, yes.
which is very sad. I'm like, I want
They're not
more
as catchy.
great Easter hymns. But like, anyway, so like that's the Christmas angle. The Baby Yoda bit, it speaks to my convictions against abortion, my own love for my children, and also just, I
Well
mean,
played.
I'm a big Star Wars fan. So
Yeah.
like,
It's
and
very personal. I like this.
it's not
This was great.
it's not all of Star Wars that I like. The sequel trilogy is yeah, but the original trilogy, and even I'll defend the prequels, and maybe
Oh
that's
my
because
gosh,
I
this is a
grew
whole
up
other podcast.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast
episode
on
1
that.
was coming out. Like, I don't like Jar Jar, of course, but anyway, we could.
Well, that's because they didn't use him properly. He was actually supposed to be who ended up being the ultimate villain, and then they chickened out and they went with
exactly.
Yeah, I'm in on that.
Yeah.
I'm in on that. Look, I got you. I've seen all the videos. I'm deep in the
Jar Jar
conspiracy.
is a Sith Lord.
You also well played because you slid in an abortion in there. So if I were just to go after you for being a Star Wars nerd, I could have gotten away with it. But then you're like, abortion. I was like, dang it.
Yep.
I just think it looks tacky. I just think it looks really tacky. If
All
you're
right.
going for formal, you got to go for it. I hate the sneakers. So when people are like you're there, you're like 95% there, and you wear sneakers.
You've worked
like,
so
why
hard.
Would you?
Yeah,
Right,
put the
right.
shoes
so
on
many-
people.
There's so
What
many
do you
cool
think of
formal
the
shoes.
understated, like the understated symbol ties? So like, I'm not a fan of the very loud, like, oh,
Mhm.
this is, but I have a tie with the president's signatures on it. I have a tie
See,
with the
that's
Millennium
nice.
Falcon that's like really tiny Millennium Falcons.
I'm
And
out
so
on
you
that.
can't tell that it's the Millennium Falcon unless
out
you
on
look
it.
real close. But
I'll
it's
look close. I'm out. Out on the Millennium Falcon.
All right. I like the
yeah.
presidential thing. The presidential signatures, it's like a little different. I like the little quirkiness. I like the accent piece for the guys. I'm going with it, Pogo.
It's got to be small though.
It has to be
Yeah.
small.
I
You
mean,
cannot go like Justin Trudeau wore these hot pink socks with flowers on them to the White
Oh,
House
no.
when he was
Oh,
groveling
no.
last
Oh,
month or 2
no.
months ago, and that was too far. That was the bridge too far. But I think
that's
the
revealing a
understated,
little bit about
the
him. that we
shamrocks
don't
I was
want.
Yeah,
down
yeah.
with. I thought JD with the shamrocks. Yeah, it was,
Tyler.
this is awesome.
Can I just rip off
You
some
need a
other
culture
male
podcast.
fashion takes that frustrate me at this point in time?
What do you
go
got?
for it.
Flood pants. Like, I don't know when it started, but suit pants that are not touching your shoe drive me insane. And it also pairs in nicely with people that wear tacky socks, because then you can see the tacky socks and the flood at the same time. So not only did you not get your pants the proper length, you decided to wear tacky socks. Double negative.
You're
When
thinking too
people
hard,
wear
yeah.
suits that are too small, there was this like men's fashion trend to get very RFK Jr., big time offender. I'll have to say it. It's too tight, dude. Like, I know you work out, brother. Like, you're clearly on the test. You look great, but you got to get a suit that fits you. Like, the skinny lapel, way too tight suit drives me crazy. Get clothes
It
that
is the
fit.
best important thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, got to make it fit. You can do kind of a skinny lapel well. It just has to be, because that was like
You know
a cool
who did
trend in
it
the
well?
90s.
Harrison Butker, when he went to visit Donald Trump 2 weeks ago, that was a great fitting because he could
didn't-
show off like
That
the,
was a skinny
the
lapel, though.
shoulders. Well, it was a skinny, but it was perfectly like it fit him perfectly. It was like straight.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, he does have a suit
good
brand,
job, Harrison.
so he better.
He'd better
at this
get it
point.
right.
And then you know who else bugs me if we're really getting into this? The dude on Twitter is like men's DIE guy or something like that.
Oh,
He literally just chirps people he politically disagrees with. Like he pinpoints stuff about fashion based upon their political affiliation, but then kind of pretends he has this veneer of being a fashion expert. But he also
He
doesn't
did walk
post
it
his own
back.
stuff.
He did
walk
walk it back
back?
though, because Ben Shapiro wore a 3-piece tweed for the address to the nation, and the guy on Twitter, who usually is like Ben Shapiro looks terrible, was like he nailed it. So
That's pandering. He's trying to win you back. He's trying to Gavin Newsom this whole thing by having people on the podcast trying to come back to the middle. So
It's gonna be
love
like the
Gavin
new
Newsom as a
takedown.
verb like that. That's great.
Yeah, that's the new
maybe I'll
verb,
coin
new
that. We're
takedown
Gavin
verb.
Newsoming, yeah. And I'm Steve Bannoning with my sock take. I'm saying no. I'm going to be really extreme. No tacky socks. You'll never catch me in them. Tyler, man, thank you so much for coming on. This was a ton of fun. Thank you for taking the time. Can you plug your books again so people can make sure to go check it out, or where to follow you for more of your work?
Yeah, no, gladly. So this is my new book that is completely destroying. Oh, there we go. If I just do this, make it my face. The Woktopus, the Dark Money Cabal Manipulating the Federal Government. It is available in hardcover, paperback, and online on ebook. It will be an audiobook that I recorded myself. Thank God they let me record it. I've always wanted to do that. It's like a bucket list thing. And I think, it's great. And this is my first book, Making Hate Pay. It's the Southern Poverty Law Center is so powerful. They're trying to prevent the cover from showing up on this live stream. But that's my book about the Southern Poverty Law Center, why they can't be relied upon, why they're an utterly disgraceful smear factory, and the lawsuits against them. Like, unfortunately, and this is a sad news, D.A. King, who was an immigration activist in Georgia, has just passed away. But his defamation lawsuit against the SPLC is going to continue because it's his organization, not just him. So prayers for his family, but also, I'm always glad to mention his important fight to clear his name after the SPLC smeared him. But yeah, you can find me on X at Tyler2 O'Neill, and find the Daily Signal on all platforms except TikTok, because we take no truck with the Chinese Communist Party.
Sweet.
Cheers to that. Cheers to that. Well, hey, go have fun on St. Patrick's Day. If you want to help out the show, join the Champions Club. It's the best place to support us, catholicvote.org/champions. You can leave us reviews, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Subscribe there. That helps us out the most. But above all, pray for us. St. Thomas More, St. Fidelis, Our Lady of Guadalupe. Pray for us. Go enjoy St. Patrick's Day. Go have